WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. With the trade of Joe Flacco to the Denver Broncos, not only did you get the WNST text from Coons Ford Security Boulevard, but obviously the minds then open up on the other side in Denver to say, well, what did we get in Joe Flacco? My phone started ringing off the hook, and we're doing radio here. They're doing radio out in Denver. This guy's become a friend over the years. He is a Dallas native and a Rock Chalk alum. Calls me from a New York cell phone, so I know he's not a Bronco who was bred out there. But Brandon Krisztal's done sports radio out there at Orange Blue 760 and KOA News Radio. You can find him at BK Denver Sports. And, you know, I don't know if it was a shocker to your system, Brand, but I saw you in Atlanta, and we crossed paths a couple times. I don't think anybody said anything about, hey, Flacco's going to wind up in Denver. It was just sort of one of those places where maybe folks thought, well, Elway's going to turtle up here and maybe regroup and get it back together. And instead, I guess Elway can't spend the night of his life going to bed without having a quarterback that he feels can win a Super Bowl, right?
Yeah, and I think the real question is, can Joe Flacco still win a Super Bowl? And you might know better than me or anyone else in Denver and Broncos country, but it does feel like it's at least a slight upgrade from Case Keenum, at the very least, and could be a huge upgrade if Joe plays as well in this offense as he played when Gary Kubiak had it with him in 2014, which was, I think, statistically, if not his very best, one of his best years, that 1 year Gary was there before coming to Denver and winning that Super Bowl in 2015. What's interesting is Super Bowl week, I talked to a Broncos official who said they're going to be aggressive this offseason, and they don't have cap room the way the Jets or certainly the Colts or even the Browns do, but they have a little bit and enough to make moves, and they're making cuts here and there. They let Brandon Marshall know last week that they weren't going to bring him back on his current deal. That saves you $5 million. They're going to make a couple more moves to save 5 and 10 here and there. And so this shows that they are being, quote, aggressive, but it's a pretty low-risk, high-reward move. They essentially flipped a fourth-round pick for Flacco, and he's actually going to come in this year at about the same number as Case. They're going to have to eat a little money if they can't trade Case, if he signs anywhere.
But they knew that when they signed him last year.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And it was a stopgap, and I think John was hoping for the best. And you got 18 touchdowns against 15 interceptions. Not all his fault. Some of them certainly were. A bad throw is a bad throw, regardless of your O-line or who's out there at receiver. He had a stretch, especially when they brought the record from 3-6 to 6-6, where Case wasn't lighting the world on fire, but he went 5 straight games without an interception. And so I do think he'll find work as a backup. I don't think there'll be a viable trade partner, because then they'd be on the hook for $18 million to Case this year. But I think he'll find work somewhere, and that'll offset the money a little. So I do think the Broncos are still in the quarterback market come draft time, but they aren't beholden to have to draft a quarterback, certainly with that 10th spot, or move up, especially if they don't love somebody. We know next year's class, at least on paper right now, people think might be better top to bottom in terms of those top prospects especially. But look, I'm in love with Kyler Murray. I don't know what you guys think about him out there. It doesn't really matter because you got Lamar Jackson. But if Kyler Murray found his way to Denver, I think it would make things a whole lot more exciting than, with all apologies to Joe Flacco, covering Joe Flacco at this point, just because of the boom possibility with Kyler Murray. We know there's a bust possibility for sure, but the boom potential is interesting. Did you see him in Atlanta, by the way? Did you see him that day he was at Radio Row walking by?
I did see him walk by, and you know what's interesting? You say the boom bust. That's where we are with Lamar Jackson, right? We've just dealt off a guy that John Elway still believes he can win a Super Bowl with, right? And I think that's all part of this, is to say, all right, you know, when you're a guy, you want to be on a date with a girl that likes you. When you're going for a job, you want the boss to give you the job and it validates you. Certainly what happened to Flacco here the night of the draft, where I think he probably had already gone to bed, quite frankly, because the Ravens had used their pick, right? And wakes up in the middle of the night to find out they've drafted a quarterback, and then people like me want to comment about it. And then he has to come and play, and he looked better than he's ever looked in August and into September, and very healthy. Then the team didn't play very well. They didn't run the ball at all. And I don't, you can blame that on him. I don't know how you're going to throw that on him. Certainly the wide receivers haven't been what they've been. The tight end situation has been a mess after Dennis Pitta's hip injury, and they've drafted various guys for that. The offensive line, they've lost a $10 million lineman every offseason for 3 straight off seasons now. They lost Assembly, then they lost Wagner, then they lost Jensen. So And then they've tried to change the running game with various inexpensive running backs and not Ray Rice. Justin Forsett was nice in the offense you talked about with Kubiak a couple of years ago. But, there's no one around here that really feels like they did all of this stuff for Joe and Joe failed. Yeah, Joe failed. They didn't make the playoffs, and Joe had a lead 2 times after Christmas, and the defense was the one that gave up the play that kept them out of the playoffs. Joe Flacco completed a pass in the corner to Lee Evans that got dropped, or he would have gone to 2 Super Bowls, right? So It was all sorts of things that would make Flacco smell better, but Harbaugh survived. He got a deal. DeCosta's in now, and they've just decided that 34 and the cap number and where he is physically, they didn't want him anymore. But I tell you what, he just watched Tom Brady win 1 at 41, and I don't know where that fire is for a guy that has $150 million in the bank, right? Like, it's just a different sort of light that has to go on when you've had kids and you've been hit in the head like Kiko Alonso hit him a year and a half ago. That maybe you saw that. Go back and watch that. One of the most heinous hits I've seen in the NFL to his head. That, I don't know whether he's going to come out there with the same grit and determination that he had when he got benched at Pittsburgh and had to go to Delaware. They're betting on it. I would never bet against Joe. I mean, that's how I feel about it. Joe, when he's been backed up into the corner, Joe has responded. This is Joe being emasculated, sent to the end of the bench, off the end of the bench, watch the team get eliminated, and now getting dealt off for a 4th-round draft pick. Maybe you got a really pissed off East Philly version of Joe coming out there. And if you do, he can win 12 games. Physically, I think he's fine.
Well, and I think that's kind of the biggest key is what does he have physically, and then what does he have left in the tank mentally and emotionally? And to your point, John is saying, look, Joe, I want you. And if you're good, we'll keep you for all 3 years of this contract, or maybe after a year we'll rip up the contract and give you a new 5-year deal because of the guaranteed money already being gone. If he goes out there next year and has a career year and is just comfortable in Denver and clicks with the receivers, and he's got the young running backs, you got the edge rushers with Von Miller and Bradley Chubb to at least set the tone on defense, then maybe the Broncos really do have a true steal. Back to the Kyler Murray thing, the reason I asked was when he walked by me, and I was at the Senior Bowl, and the kicker for OU was just sitting at a table next to me, and I said, how tall is he? He said, oh, he's at least an inch taller than me. And that kid, Austin Seibert, measured at 5'9" and 3/8", which isn't the tallest person in the world, obviously. But if Murray's an inch taller, then that makes him 5'10"-ish, 5'10" and 3/8", 5'10" and a half, which, again, it may still be too short for John Elway, but
we had that issue here with Billick for years and how tall is he and all that, and then I run into Doug Flutie at the Super Bowl, and I see Drew Brees getting screwed out of being up on the dais instead of Jared Goff. So I think I'm a short guy too, Brand. You know that. So the small packages thing. I hear what you're saying, but from a draft stock, he's a sure thing. People wanted Baker Mayfield to be bigger, right? Now everybody wants him, right?
Yeah, and Baker's going to certainly, I think, just like Patrick Mahomes will be a thorn in the Broncos' side for the next decade and a half. I think that Baker Mayfield could certainly be that for the Cleveland Browns and a thorn in the Ravens fans and Steelers fans and Bengals fans' sides based on what we saw last year. What's interesting about Lamar Jackson, because I hadn't really dug into the numbers. We see the games where he had big rushing games, especially early, and watch the playoff loss and with Joe sitting at the end of the bench, like you said, not able to even get the opportunity to help his team do anything. I didn't realize he only had 6 touchdowns against 3 picks. Obviously, those numbers are going to have to improve, or this project won't work. And in a couple of years, whether it's John Harbaugh or Eric DeCosta or anybody, they're all going to be looking around going, what the heck happened? How did we let Joe go, especially if Joe plays well in Denver or anywhere else? But I think Broncos fans aren't ready to buy tickets to South Florida next year for the Super Bowl with the Flacco move, but what it's showing is that John didn't think Case was good enough, and he at least wanted some sort of upgrade. If there's a quarterback he loves, if it's Drew Lock, if it's Haskins, maybe it's Kyler Murray, I don't think he'll ever get there just because of how John looks at quarterbacks. He was a 6'3", big arms quarterback, so to see a 5'10" quarterback, that doesn't compute for him. So I think this is the start of what will be a couple more moves. It's interesting you talk about the Jensen move going to Tampa, and he's a Colorado kid with ties to the Denver area, and he played his college ball at CSU Pueblo. He signs the biggest deal. For a center. And now the Broncos are facing something similar with Matt Paradis, who's a guy that they developed. He started every game till he hurt his ankle last year. He even came back from double hip surgeries a year and a half ago and played the entire 2017 season after having off-season hip surgery on each hip. Didn't miss a snap, started every game for 3.5 years, including Super Bowl 50 as not really a rookie, but a first-year player because he spent his rookie year on practice squad. And now, even though it was an ankle injury, he's still going to command top dollar, which means at least somewhere in that $10-11 million range like Jensen signed for with the Bucs. So it'll be curious to see there because, the quarterback's relationship to a center, especially a really good one. And the Broncos, I think, have a tough decision to make there. Do they want to lock that much money up into their center? But it's a guy that, when he's been out there, really has been an anchor for him. And that'll certainly make Joe Flacco's life easier coming back into this offense because Paradis played for Kubiak for 2 years and then half a year with Mike McCoy until Bill Musgrave tried to run more Kubiak-type stuff, Mike Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan-type stuff, but using McCoy's language. And now they're back to running the full Kyle Shanahan offense with this new offensive coordinator, Rich Scangarello, who has been with Kyle 3 of the last 4 years.
I tell you what, for Flacco and centers, you talk about how things change when you don't have a center. The Matt Burke thing changed everything here for Flacco.
Yeah.
He never had the same success, and I know you guys are familiar with Gino Gradkowski out there as well. And there was a point where Alex Mack was on the marketplace, and I thought Alex Mack would change your quarterback. I mean, I think certainly for Matt Ryan, they got Alex Mack. They went to the Super Bowl that year, right? So I thought all of that. I still believe all of that. So the notion that Flacco would come out there and you'd say, well, we'll just draft a guy and make him a center. I think the best thing you can do for Flacco is to give him a great center.
And hopefully John Elway and his personnel people, at least for Joe's sake and the Broncos' sake, are aware of that and track it closely enough. You have to think that they do, but maybe center is one of those things that and I think O-line play in general is something that front offices are a little not confused by, but unaware of unless you have an O-line background. Now, the Broncos just brought in Mike Munchak to be their O-line coach. Some people think he should have been hired as a head coach, but they end up getting him not even as an associate or assistant head coach, just O-line coach. It's just kind of dumb luck that his deal was up. He enjoyed his meeting in Denver, I guess, well enough with John and with his right-hand man, Matt Russell, and his daughter and son-in-law and granddaughter live 10 minutes from the Broncos facility. So he just wanted a change. I think his wife certainly was spearheading this to some degrry.
Dude, he's a legend. He's a legend, man. He has nothing to prove other than to be happy, literally, man. I remember I was a big Houston Oilers fan. He was a Penn State guy, from my dad's hometown in Scranton and all that stuff. So, great respect for Munchak, who, always was in line to get the Steelers job back in the day, right?
That's what we all thought, right?
Yeah.
And so this opportunity came up and it worked out. So I wonder if, and time will tell here in the next couple of weeks, really, whether or not they think Paradis is a key to the success of this Broncos O-line, or that Munchak will just whip into shape whomever they throw out there. Connor McGovern, who started every game at right guard last year before Paradis went down, then moved over to center, they like a lot, but he's a really strong kid who isn't a career center. He's worked on it a lot, and I think he held up okay, but he's not Matt Paradis. So if they want to keep him, he's only got 1 year left on his deal, so they'll be looking at some sort of switch next year again, potentially, so then you go into the 3 years in a row with a different center. You want that consistency, and when you talk about Matt Burke, we obviously had Tom Nalen here in Denver forever, and they've had good centers since, but they haven't had Tom Nalen. I think Paradis might be the closest thing to it. He's a guy that could get you that decade and a half if you're lucky and he stays healthy. And so it's funny because we don't talk about centers. You and I spent more time talking about centers right now than most people do in an entire given calendar year. But it certainly matters, and I think it will make Flacco's life easier. And then they also have to decide what they're doing at linebacker. Are they going to try to poach C.J. Mosley from the Ravens if the Ravens don't pony up there, franchise them, or whatever the case may be?
Well, you talk about Paradis. Paradis would be a guy that the Ravens would be freeing up money to try to go get. Yeah,
maybe so. Is John Brown a Flacco guy? Is that somebody they could add to take the top off the defense? Because you have Emmanuel Sanders at 32 coming off an Achilles. Then you have a bunch of young receivers that they like in Cortland Sutton and Deshaun Hamilton, who Penn State fans certainly know. You talked about Penn State. He's their all-time leader in every statistical category, but none of those guys are taking the top off the defense the way that John Brown can. Now, there aren't a lot of John Browns, and everyone wants the next Tyreek Hill, but with Joe's arm and this thin mile-high air, then maybe John Brown finds his way to Denver on a 2 or 3 year deal to match Flacco's. The one thing about Flacco's deal, he's got 3 years left on it at pretty reasonable money, right? 18.5, 20, and then 24.5. Well, John Elway has 3 years left on his deal, and I think that's part of what factors into why he went and got Joe Flacco. If John Elway is not going to sign, and I can't swear because I don't know John Elway. John Elway took the job with $100 million in the bank, and I think his money's growing because he bought more car dealerships. He had basically a moratorium.
He's also won a little bit there too. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. So he sold all his dealerships. He's got his steakhouses. Then he bought new dealerships. It was like a 15 or 20 year moratorium on buying new dealerships. But now John Elway Chevrolet and John Elway Cadillac, they're popping up everywhere because he can get back in the car business with that $100 million in the bank. So. And I remember when he first took the job, he would joke, I didn't realize 6 o'clock happened twice a day because he wasn't used to being up that early. And look, life is good if you're John Elway. He obviously won more early than he has late.
Well,
right?
he's not going to do this forever, though, right? I mean, how many?
And that's it, too.
I mean, Ozzie just gave it up. I mean, it's a young man's gig. It really is, right?
No doubt. And even if you surround yourself with the right people, the idea that he's going to be a personnel guy well into his 70s and beyond seems crazy. So I think he's going to finish out this 3 year deal. That's his plan, I guess. Joe Ellis, or if any of the Bolin kids ever actually take over the team, could relieve John of his duties sooner than that 3 years. But I think his plan is to figure out within these next 3 years how to get back to another Super Bowl and obviously try to win it, right? That goes without saying. But so that he can say, we were there, we went at least 2 times, maybe 3, maybe 4, right? Obviously, I'm getting far ahead of myself. But that we did all we could to win, not just setting up for the future, which he's trying with these draft classes, obviously. But I think that's where his head is. It's like, okay, I've got a 3 year window. We're going to get back to that game one more time because I'm sick of spending Super Bowl week just, swinging by a couple of appearances, taking some checks, and then being done with it. I think once they won Super Bowl 50, that changed sort of John's mentality. But then the house kind of came crumbling down because Peyton had to retire. He just didn't have anything left. And Brock Osweiler felt slighted and left them. Turns out probably long-term to be a blessing in disguise, but it's been kind of 3 years just, meandering through the desert. And then you have the Chargers playing good every year. And obviously with what Patrick Mahomes is bringing to Kansas City now, he knows that he's got a 3 year window and he wants to maximize it.
Well, Joe Flacco is headed to Denver. Brendan Krisztal joining us here. BK, Denver Sports, the way to join him, as well as Orange Blue 760 and KOA. You can find him out on Twitter as well as on the interweb. Man, do Rockies matter out there at all? Is there any Arenado fever or anything going? I mean, I'm just saying. You talk about teams not trying. We have that going on with the baseball team here, man.
Yeah, no doubt, and obviously seeing the Manny Machado sort of sweepstakes, but seeing how last year went down and everything there, and Zach Britton in pinstripes, I can't imagine it's easy being a Orioles fan these days. For the Rockies, it's interesting. They skip arbitration, so that way they don't have to badmouth Nolan in arbitration. He signs I think the highest 1 year deal for a guy facing arbitration at $26 million. I think they're waiting for both Harper and Machado to set the market. I think Nolan's agents are, so that then they can come back and say, all right, this is what we want based on what these two dudes just signed for. What's interesting is like DJ LeMahieu, who's been maybe the best second baseman in the National League the last 5 years. He's got a hitting title. He's got some Silver Sluggers and some Gold Gloves. They let him go to the Yankees for 2 years, $24 million, not 10 years, $250 or 5 years, $140, 2 years, $24.
Well, they're all getting stingy when they're making money. I mean, that's where we are right now, and obviously the Players Association is going to be talking about that at length. Yeah. And we're headed toward a work stoppage with a sport that nobody gives a rat's ass about to begin with.
No, I think you're right. And if the World Series were canceled again, obviously you have your baseball fans and certainly history books.
I would go trick-or-treating is what I would do because they play it Halloween anyway, right?
You watch Thursday Night Football, which you already are going to do. You're going to watch a bunch of college on Saturday and Sunday Night Football and Monday Night Football. So you're really not missing much. Those Tuesday, Wednesday games and the Friday game, but most people are going to watch a high school football game or just have a date night on Friday anyway. So it's not changing anyone's life if the World Series gets skipped again. I know that's hard for baseball fans to hear.
Well, every 25 years they should skip the World Series, I think. Right?
Just to even things up. No, but the Rockies, look, the pitchers and catchers are there. Full squad's getting there. They obviously still want to build on the momentum of going to the playoffs the last 2 years, although I'll never get on board with calling the one play-in game playoffs, but they put up a banner because that's what they do around here because it happens so infrequently. But 2 years in a row in the playoffs, the Nolan thing will hang over their head. Look, MLB Network just did their top 100 players like they do every year. No surprise, Trout was number one for the 6th time in 7 years he's been playing or something, which is so bananas. That dude is so good. Then they had Nolan third.
Well, this is how they're going to screw Arenado because they've all gotten together to screw Harper and Machado. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's how this works, and that's how they save tens of millions of dollars. They don't care about kids in Cuba and Venezuela and giving them 50 grand or 20 grand or what this academy cost. We're not going to give Arenado $45 million because we gave Harper 42. You know,
right.
That's where they're going to. This is where they're going to draw the line, and they've spent 2 years doing that, and it's now after Valentine's Day, and they've sort of made a mockery of the two best players, Trout notwithstanding and your guy Arenado notwithstanding, in the sport. And this is how they're going to artificially keep down business. You know, they have a cartel. They're putting it to work.
Yeah, and it's not that surprising when you know anything about baseball ownership and about the guys running those organizations. We obviously put the NFL under a microscope, but in a lot of ways they're a lot more forward-thinking. And then obviously we just had an NBA All-Star weekend, and you're like, okay, these guys, they really seem to know what it's doing when it comes to, you know, maximizing their value of their league and their players, and it helps obviously who the players are. But baseball is such a distant third to them, and I could even make the case that where we are with soccer, not just MLS, but soccer worldwide, baseball is certainly well behind the popularity. I think soccer at some point is going to overtake it just in America with people a fan of European teams, let alone the MLS with its growth. So, yeah, I feel like baseball, even with the new commissioner here in recent years, is still just stuck in the, 1950s, it feels like, when it comes to their forward thinking. And so nothing's going to change. I don't know what's going to change that. What would be interesting, the final thing on Arenado is his backup heading into camp here this year at spring training is his cousin, Josh Fuentes, who's just a year or two younger than him. He and his brother, Nolan's brother, who's on the Giants, in the Giants farm system, there's 6 of them, the cousins, all grew up in Orange County together, beating the heck out of each other. Similar, I think, to the way the Gronkowskis grew up, except these guys are all cousins. And Fuentes was quoted in the Denver Post as saying, yeah, I'm better than Nolan. I know that he's won 6 Gold Gloves and 4 All-Stars. He goes, but I've thought that since we were 12. I think I'm better than him. And so it'd be interesting to see if Fuentes makes the 25-man roster. And then if Nolan is not the long-term plan for the Rockies or the money can't come together, if Nolan's replaced by his cousin, who tore it up in the Pacific Coast League last year. He's a late bloomer. As they said, he had to go JUCO route, and then he wasn't good at low A, then he was good at single A, high A, and then last year he was the Pacific Coast Player of the Year and a AAA All-Star. So something to keep an eye on if Nolan is no longer a Rocky, his cousin Josh Fuentes. But yeah, people I think are lukewarm because the Rockies have won a little bit, and the Nuggets are winning too. So, you know, we got stuff to talk about, but this is a Broncos town. You know that, Nestor, and so that's where it'll always begin and end.
By the way, I would say Joe Flacco left his little brother here to play quarterback at Towson, so we have that going on with the siblings too. Maybe Joe Flacco's brother will be our quarterback around here. Brandon Krisztal does all things sports radio out in the Mile High City at KOA and Orange Blue 760. You can find him at BK Denver Sports. And by the way, I don't think it's a Broncos town. I think it's a Rocky Mountain High town with a Red Rocks problem. You know, next time you're at Red Rocks this summer, just have one for me. Just toast me somewhere out there and say, you know, this one's for Ness, all right?
I will. I've already circled. There's a bunch of shows coming, and Red Rock's about 20 minutes from my house, so I'll certainly make it out there a couple of times. And obviously you're not going to come out to see Tom Petty anymore, unfortunately, but hopefully you make it out for a show soon.
By the way, I saw that Neil Diamond is playing Red Rocks, and I know this might be one of his final performances or appearances or something, so I think that's going to be a big one out there. Neil Diamond under the Colorado sky. That's nice.
It'd be great. By the way, I saw, Nestor, this is taking us further off the path, I saw Elton John on his farewell Yellow Brick Road tour here in Denver. He played Pepsi Center where the Nuggets and Avs play.
I had some friends at that show last week, yes.
Yeah, and while, look, he's not 1978 Elton John, he's certainly on less drugs, which is probably better for him, he still has plenty left on his fastball, plays nothing but hits. He's great with the crowd, couple of costume changes, and luckily for any Elton John fans, you have plenty of opportunity to see this farewell Yellow Brick Road tour because it goes through December of 2020. It's got obviously a bunch of European and Australian dates, but they're back in America like 2 more times on different legs of this tour. So if you can get in the car and drive, or if they're coming near you guys there, obviously they will up and down the East Coast.
Elton is playing here.
Cleveland. Yeah, go see it. Spend the money, go see it. I guarantee it'll be worth it.
When are you going to come down? All that good stuff. All right, hey, man, a pleasure to have you on. Enjoy Joe Flacco. I have not fully inked my Dear Joe Flacco letter yet. I'm still in the midst of talking to folks like you and sort of processing how I should write about the guy that they actually traded up for, drafted, who actually made the playoffs every year, who made it fun to be a fan, who won the Super Bowl, and beyond that, dude, and I've been doing this, 35 years now I've been at this professionally here. He's my all-time favorite Baltimore athlete, by far. Just one of the really good dudes, a regular guy who, was the quarterback, the most famous guy on the team, the guy with all the money, and a guy who's always been a right guy, as they'd say. So you're getting a good human being in Joe Flacco, a good guy.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that. I'll certainly let Broncos fans and Broncos country know that.
Well, that's what I'll be writing about, probably.
Yeah, well, when you do, make sure you give me a heads up, and I'll certainly put it out there to all of our listeners as well. Appreciate the time, Nestor. Talk to you here soon.
Man, Snoop Dogg and Ice Cube and Warren G and the Dog Pound are playing Red Rocks. What? On 420? What?
420.
Yeah. I'm looking at this, man. Denver's crazy. See you later, Brendan. But poor Joe Flacco. Joe, don't eat the gummies, Joe Flacco. Keep the gummies from the kids, please. Tell Dana, keep the kids away from the gummies. It's my only advice to Joe. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I'm out in the Toyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. Our morning newspaper delivers digitally to your email inbox each and every morning at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. $5 down, $10 a month. Get in the best shape of your life. Also brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Jockey Club, where they are racing, and they have a beautiful new sports bar down there. You got to go check it out. Laurel Park is there for you. The entries on the front of WNST.net as well as in our morning newspaper. I am Nestor. I am a very available individual. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live right here on our Facebook Live as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 at WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.